Welcome back to the enLIGHTenUP podcast, and if you're new to the show, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lisa Watson, and I will be joined by my co-hosts Nicole Frolick and Brian Koenigberg. The enLIGHTenUP podcast is a weekly show that provides an unconventional and refreshing spin on spirituality, where three friends and weekly guests share informative, fun, and usually off-the-wall conversation. And unlike others, we provide fringe and skeptical viewpoints on all topics, because it's been our experience that the echo chamber is a pretty boring place from which to learn. So regardless of where you are in your spiritual journey, we can promise you'll find a place to fit in here. So we invite you to sit down, grab a drink, and listen in on our casual, entertaining, and hopefully enlightening conversation. And if you're interested in supporting our podcast and helping us to be able to continue to produce, enhance, and expand the show for our audience, then please send your support to our PayPal account at info@enlightenup.us, or go to our website, enlightenup.us, and check out our merchandise shop, where you can purchase merchandise that will allow you to express your spiritual humor. All profits go towards the show. Thank you again so much for listening and supporting us. And now, let's jump right into the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to enLIGHTenUP. I am here with Brian and Lisa, and we have a huge announcement for all of you. If you remember, you listened to Jessica Alstrom on our last episode, and Brian talked about how much fun it would be to go to Vegas to be a part of the Quantum Revolution Tour. And he has convinced Lisa and I to join him, and it seems like the enLIGHTenUP podcast is on our way to Vegas next month. And we are excited about this because there's going to be so much interesting, exciting, and revolutionary experiences to be had. I'm actually quite concerned that Brian may not be our skeptic once we come back from that. And what's and what's really fun is for today's episode, Lisa, Brian, and I are all in the same room. So hopefully we won't talk over each other like we usually do. But this Quantum Revolution Tour, everyone, we would love to actually invite you to join us in Vegas next month, because there is a huge promo going on right now that if you book your hotel before the 20th of February, you will get 50% off your ticket to the actual Revolution Tour. And to give us some more information about that, we have invited Christian Escobedo onto the show, and he is a thought leader in the global freedom movement. Christian strongly believes your creativity only extends as far as your ability to communicate, and I would have to agree with Christian. Christian has been coaching in the areas of success, psychology, and communication privately and in group settings for the past 5 years. As producer of the Vin Armani show, Christian expresses the ultimate way to leverage communication through technology. Christian brings his expertise to the Quantum Revolution community, tour stage, and quantum coaching programs. In Las Vegas, he will be sharing about the technologies people can harness to find the freedom they desire and deserve. Christian, welcome to enLIGHTenUP. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm just so excited to have you on, and I know Lisa and Brian are.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit to your intro that we're not just bringing on Christian to talk with us a little bit more about the event in Las Vegas, but the next 3 episodes after Jessica, so 4 episodes in a row, will all be people involved in the mystical, magical Alstrom Palooza tour in Vegas. That's going to change my life. So to our listeners who just heard Jessica last week, and now you're going to hear this episode with Christian, be ready, because the next 2 weeks after this, we're going to have 2 other guests as well.
Yeah, and there is so much beautiful information they're going to be sharing with us. And to our listeners, not only do we want to invite you to come join us, but we also need your resumes if you know a skeptic out there, because I'm pretty sure we're going to need to look over some.
Come on now.
Getting close.
So, Christian, it looks like from what you're offering and what you're all about, that obviously communication is very important, but you have a strong interest in technology and spirituality. How did that all come about?
Yeah, it's actually kind of all came together recently when I was in Thailand when we were doing the teachings with Quantum and with Jess. I realized that there is a really, really, really interesting connection between technology and spirituality. And especially moving into what was happening now with the state of the world, and also politics and the culture, and how we witnessed the internet boom in the last like 10 to 15 years. Now it's moving into a whole new area of, I would say, a new understanding and a new culture and a new nation. And I really believe that these things connect into the ether or into the spiritual world as well.
You just reminded me, we were watching, what was that television show that we were watching the other night?
Called Valley of the Boom on National Geographic Channel.
And it was about Netscape, and
it was about the early boom in the mid 90s of technology.
And we were just talking about how I said I think that the internet has had such an impact on people and awakening, that it's been a key part of what we've needed to awaken, to all be connected the way that we are now.
Yeah, the idea of connectivity, I mean, is from what it used to be. You know, think about when we were all in high school, and connectivity, a large scale connectivity might have been across state lines. You might have gone on a vacation and met somebody and like, okay, now we're going to become pen pals. And now the idea of connectivity is in a matter of seconds. I can be, you know, on a video call or chatting or emailing anyone anywhere on the planet and sharing ideas. And, you know, especially when you look at spirituality, because spirituality means something differently in all these different locations.
And I believe that it connects in a really interesting way also, because it's kind of the bridge between the spiritual or the ether or the non-physical into the physical. So think about like your iPhone. If you were to go and put an idea onto Facebook, you would take that idea from your head, from the non-physical, and then make it physical by posting it onto Facebook and transferring that idea to other people. So, and this also connects into many, many, many ways. And Tesla was onto a lot of these ideas and discoveries. And then I believe that the internet was also not necessarily a invention, but it was a discovery of how this connection between the spiritual realm, the 5D, and the 3D, the physical realm, how they all start to connect with each other.
So where do you begin with this whole idea of connectivity with spirituality and technology? Like, where does it all begin for you?
So Tesla was onto it, and people that have been doing code and understanding the way the internet works and the way that technology works, they are also onto it. And just think about like the way we don't necessarily even know how this is possible, and like how like I really believe that we've never even like we've seen a spark of electricity, but we don't actually know what electricity is and how that works. But what we do know is that it's there and it happens. So think about like a light bulb. When you flip a switch, the light turns on and it just happens. And that's a connection between the non-physical and the physical. The same thing with the internet and the way this information is now traveling. There's this really interesting connection between that. And I think where we start to backwards engineer how that works, and that's kind of what's happening too with the modalities of like spiritual healing, theta healing, and rapid manifestation and things like that. Like you can start to backwards engineer how those things are occurring and break it down into a science. And that's really kind of what we're doing with the Quantum Revolution Tour also, is like we're breaking it down, what we don't understand, the mysterious, the quantum world, into a science, and how to implement that into self-development and rapidly start to shift your consciousness from the 3D into the 5D and back so you can manifest.
You know, so I don't get sold out as not being a skeptic anymore. The only thing I have to throw out there, based on what you're saying, and I generally agree, but when you said we don't understand how electricity works, I think we have a pretty good understanding. I mean, in terms of, you know, people that study, scientists and people that study electricity, we know how electricity works. So I'm just gonna make sure I keep my foot in the skeptic door there.
He doesn't want to lose his job.
To a certain extent, I agree that we understand how it works, but I do think that there comes a point where we're like baffled by it. And there's just, it's kind of like if you were to witness a rapid manifestation or to witness a rapid healing, a theta healing or something like that, you would know how it's done. You could backwards engineer it, but then you would come to the point where you're like, okay, how is this possible? It's like total magic. Same thing with the internet.
Okay, I can understand what you're saying. I guess it's akin to the idea of paying attention. You know, I say that a lot, and it's if you don't think about a thing, and I flip the switch, right, and magic happens. You know, and it's like, okay, and you don't really think about how ions are moving and things are happening, and you're completing a circuit. You're right. And I've kind of drawn a parallel similar to that in terms of how skeptics think.
Yeah, it's interesting.
When I look at what you're going to talk about, what you and Jessica and Jennifer and Amber are all going to be talking about, you know, over the next 4 weeks on our podcast, and then when we go to Las Vegas, and then even in all the other, you know, events that you guys are doing all over the world, for me as a skeptic, when I look at what you're talking about, it's baffling. Because I'm just not thinking about it. I'm not, and I have no interest in thinking about it. And I think that's the key. When you look at electricity, flipping the switch, most people take it for granted. I take my life for granted. I take all the you know, everything that happens, you know, with technology, the internet, electricity, internal combustion engines, you know, everything. And we just take it for granted, and we don't think about how they work and how they affect our lives. And that is, when I look at why I'm a skeptic and why I don't think I'm not going to be one, is I'm taking where I am, I guess, in 3D for granted, and I'm not thinking about and not caring about where I'm going.
And a lot of the things, because we're moving into dimensions. So like what's perceived on the third dimension in the physical reality, in the forward, backward, up, down, right, left reality, is not necessarily the same as what's perceived in the fifth dimension, in the spiritual or the energetic realm. So like, in order to think of these things from this position, that's where it becomes baffling. So we have to really start to understand what's happening in 5D and start to move and start to bring that technology into 3D in order to use it, and kind of go back and forth. And I really believe that that's what the internet has provided for us. And going back to, I believe that the internet was a discovery based off of the Akashic records, on how the information moves from the Akashic records. So
really,
the Akashic records would be the record of the soul. This is also the record, tapping into that and understanding the communication that it speaks, and going back and forth between 3D and 5D.
That's very interesting. I've never heard it said that way.
Yeah, I know a lot of geeks that would totally disagree with
that. Who don't even know what Akashic records are.
And taking away from what it is. You know, it's funny. I read this joke the other day, because now I'm in a tech company and I see these things, and the word algorithm was given to commemorate Al Gore's contribution to technology.
Oh my goodness.
That's a stretch.
Well, it's funny, because there was a rumor in the 2000s sometime that he, or I don't know if he ever said it or how it started, but you know, that he invented the internet, which is just laughable.
Okay.
Moving on.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, this is the way I see it, is that, you know, like Brian, you were saying before, as someone who gets into my car and turns the key and puts it into drive, I don't really care about how that all happens. I just want to get in my car and get from point A to point B. However, when you bring in awareness into the equation, because that's kind of what we're talking about, and this sort of awareness, I believe awareness is the greatest alchemy there is. And once you become aware, I really don't think you can unawaken yourself.
I don't know.
Unless unless someone's heavily medicating you, okay, like I'm talking very nefarious acts here, but in general, with nothing working against your own consent, I just don't think that you can go back. And Brian, whether you want to believe this or not, I do believe your mind is thinking in many different ways than it was a year ago.
Oh, sure. It's opened up, but to stay with your idea of getting in the car, turning the key, and getting from point A to point B, if I sat down with you over an hour and just taught you everything there is to understand about the internal combustion engine and awakened you to what is actually going on, my guess is the next time you got in the car, you wouldn't think about what you just learned, and you'd still just, okay, I'm going to turn the key and get from point A to point B. So I awakened your mind to what is actually happening, but you're like, I don't need it. And it's a
interesting.
It's a choice. Yes, I am more awakened, but I am choosing to not care.
Yeah, and this also applies to like theta healing and rapid manifestation and things of that nature. People are not necessarily they're not trying to become the scientists. What they want is the hacks. And that's really where the scientists and the creators come in, that backward, like what we do is we backwards engineer this stuff. So like what we're teaching is the hacks. You don't have to, in order to do, learn theta healing or learn how to be an intuitive or any of those things. You don't necessarily need to go and spend your life, 50 years of your life studying it. You just need the hacks. You just need to know how to go, walk to your car, open the door, put the key in the ignition, and turn the thing on, and then start driving. And really, that's what we're teaching at the Quantum Revolution within these 3 days. We boiled down who knows how many years of knowledge and wisdom and experience into about 3 days, so we can teach these modalities and these understandings, and also use the technology that will bring in the rapid learning and bring in the acceleration process within a group. And also the difference between it and any other event would be looking at the 3 phases of consciousness. So knowledge, experience, and wisdom. The gap between knowledge and wisdom is going to be the experience. So what we focused on is bringing the knowledge and the experience together, so by the time you leave, you have the wisdom.
Oh, that's really cool.
I like that.
So I have a question for you. In the spiritual community, there is a little bit of a taboo, or a, I guess, what's the word? Like technology gets a bad rap, in a sense that people believe like, that you should just be able to create and do everything without anything outside of you, which, you do want to have a level of that understanding and know that you don't need it. But there's also the way of looking at it that why not give yourself tools to assist you in, as you said, accelerating your understanding, or even there's, your activations, your ability to expand your consciousness. Because if I understand things correctly, we here on Earth don't exactly have the most advanced technology that other beings from other places in the universe have. And I think it makes their experience much easier and less work, and allows them to facilitate many things that we wouldn't even be able to fathom. What is your whole take on that?
This is great. So this is where it's going to get juicy. So we are moving into a very painful time for the 3D. And it's because we're living in an old, outdated, broken matrix that does not work anymore. The way I like to describe it is a horse and carriage that we're living in 3D right now versus a rocket ship that we're moving into. But unfortunately, we've got to go through some pain in order to get to that rocket ship. So what's being established right now in many ways with technology is the new culture. We discussed it on the Vin Armani show for about 3 months heavily. We deep dive into all these different ideas. But what it comes down to is freedom. And freedom being a very, very misunderstood word and misused word, but freedom is the ability to create at will. So freedom is the ability to do the things that you want and to create at will. Now, looking at the broken, outdated matrix and where we're living right now in 3D, there's a lot of beliefs that we're free, but we're slaves in many ways. And one of the things that will completely disrupt the system is the new monetary system that's being put into place. And
are you talking about
exactly.
cryptocurrency?
And the old monetary system, the old outdated broken matrix way of exchanging value is handing bills around. And the reason why that is corrupt and it's broken is because it's centralized. So there's a authority that controls the way that moves, and it's manipulated, and it's centralized. So it's corrupt and it's controlled. What's being put into place now into the new, and this is definitely related to the spiritual realm, is the cryptocurrency. Now, the cryptocurrency is a decentralized platform. It's a decentralized way of exchanging value, which is the most, I would say, important. It's not even the technology that's important. It's the fact that it's decentralized. And let me kind of break this down for the audience a little bit so they can get some insight into this. Centralized authority would be, it's kind of like, so let's look at the 3 phases of the internet. The internet was established, and internet version 1 was you go to the information. So I go to a website, I log into AOL, I go to a chat room, I start to give my information and connect my information. Internet version 2, now the information starts to come to me. So like MySpace and Facebook, the information is now being also delivered to me, and then I'm going back and forth with the information. The problem with that is the information, and it's kind of what we've seen in the last 10 years, the information is centralized, it's controlled. And we're starting to see this with Facebook and a lot of platforms, Google, a lot of platforms now. It's a censorship. Exactly. And they're manipulating the information. The same thing is happening with the monetary system.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been censored through YouTube.
It's crazy, and it's getting worse and worse to the point where they will completely shoot. It's an old, outdated system. Now, what's being put into place now, the information it's the internet version 3. The information, we're going to the information is coming to us, but it's not centralized. So the way cryptocurrency works is there's millions of people on a network, and they're helping move this currency around. So they hop onto this network. It's a network. You don't have to have a password. You don't have to have an account. There are third-party services like Coinbase and stuff like that you sign up for it, but you don't technically have to have an account to exchange cryptocurrency. And there are people all over the world that do what's called mining to help move this currency. It's basically solving math problems. And the currency is then exchanged through this network. So the network is not controlled by one single person. In other words, if a government or an institution wanted to come after Facebook and say, you're not doing what we want you to do with the information, Facebook has to abide by those rules. But since there's millions of people collectively helping this information move, there's no central authority that can come and say, we want you to do this, and this information has to do this. It wouldn't work like that. Although there are developers in charge of building the network and stuff like that, and we've even seen, and this moves into more of the spiritual aspect of it, we've even seen as of recently, there was a war. It was called a hash war. And there was a war in the ether within this network, which proves that it's a culture, it's a new discovery, a new uncharted land that we're basically moving in. But the interesting thing about this is it's in the ether, in the spiritual or the internet world.
Can you expand on that a little bit more? So what was this hash war exactly?
So basically, because when you introduce value into the equation, obviously, especially high level value, like something like Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, where the idea is so wanted that people start to butt heads, and ideas start to conflict with each other. And it's actually what happened within religion too. Like there are these schisms, these separations of ideas. And basically what's happened within the crypto world is Bitcoin had a schism because one group didn't like what the other group was doing. So the other group said, okay, we're going to create our own way. So it forked. That's what they call it. It was a hard fork. And now you have a whole new level of this thing, a whole new belief system, a whole new way of doing it. And that just keeps happening. Well, what happened was one person said that we own it. The other person said that we own it. And they said, do it our way. We said, do it our way. And basically the other person said, we're going to completely bankrupt the system if you do not do it our way. And what happened was, and it was kind of like up for grabs, but what happened was another fork, but they were really trying to control and to centralize a decentralized system.
Mm-hmm.
So when was this, and is it still going on, or was it resolved after the last fork?
Yeah, it happened in Bitcoin Cash, and it was we actually had the guy on our show. He's a really interesting and probably one of the most controversial characters in the world of cryptocurrency. But a lot of people thought he was the original creator of Satoshi, or of Bitcoin, which is Satoshi Nakamoto. So he started to rattle a lot of cages, and basically it happened on November 15th. And as of right now, I would say,
wait, just last year,
within the last 2 months. And I would say, like, there was a lot of talk, and there was a lot of, because we really didn't know what we were getting into, and a lot of companies and developers and people kind of took sides of this thing. But I would say now it's over. But there's something called a 51% attack, which they can basically double spend transactions if they control 51% of the network. So what's
the parallel with what you guys are doing, or how does this parallel with spirituality?
So it's all about freedom. So with the spiritual understanding, you start to open up doors of freedom. And one of the doors that you will, when you start to go down, especially heavily on a spiritual path, you're going to understand that the system is broken, outdated, and corrupt. And in order to live in a free world, we have to understand the tools that are outside of us that we can use to enhance our freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that currency is the head of the snake, and it is the one area in the 3D that we are certainly not free.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Everyone's a slave to it. However, I do believe, though, that once you have that awareness, as you said, that the matrix is a corrupt system, you still can play it and play within the game and still have it work for
absolutely.
You. So for instance, you were talking about like cryptocurrency and how like the fiat dollar is probably it's most likely on its way out. It's just a matter of time. I also do believe, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, we live here in a physical world. And it's very important to be very much in touch with the ethers and our spirituality and all that, but to not lose sight of some of the physical things around us. And one of the things that are tangible and very real are things like, for instance, gold and silver. And so from, I'm not really heavily into the whole cryptocurrency. I do own some cryptocurrency, and I've been thinking about purchasing some silver, but only because you always want to have something that you can hold on to that's yours, that no one can just take away from you. Because who knows how this, if you don't have a deep understanding of how the system works, then you're kind of at a disadvantage of being prepared for certain things. But there are certain ways that you can always protect yourself and be prepared in the event that something does go wrong. What are your thoughts on all of that?
It's really interesting. And I agree with that. I think to diversify is great. And I think gold and silver definitely, precious metals definitely hold their space. Here is where the problem lies with that. is you cannot take gold or silver and exchange it the way you would like a dollar, you know. So, and even a dollar is an old system compared to cryptocurrency. Now, looking at to moving into this aspect of it, so crypto has all the features of gold except for it being a physical commodity or a physical exchange way of holding value. But there's trade-offs. So you do own your own wallets and your own keys, which you have to be very responsible with them too, and keep good track of them and understand how it works before you start to use them at a high level. Mm-hmm. And also, you cannot program a piece of gold. So in other words, now that we're moving into the idea of understanding how the internet works and programming works, we can program, just imagine if you can program your dollar bill to do certain commands. So a good example of this would be if I own a gym membership and I'm using that gym membership 3 times a week for an hour every time that I go to the gym. Every time I'm not using that gym membership, I'm losing out. Basically, it's wasted space, it's wasted money, it's wasted value. With something like crypto, with Ethereum in particular, but Ethereum has its flaws too, but let's just look at Ethereum. You can now take that gym membership and when I'm not using it, I could rent it out to other people to use. So now I can exchange value by having a programmable way to exchange the value, just like you can program if you were to program a dollar bill. I can now rent out my gym membership for somebody else to use it when I'm not using it, and then take it back when I need to use it. Now
so that's like Airbnb.
Exactly. And it's going to be implemented in the next 3 to 5 years, I would say, where almost everything will run like this.
But it really depends on the merchant. I mean, there's that is great for us as individuals, but not great for the merchant, because they're going to miss out on. You could have one person join the gym and then rent out, you know, he's only there 1 hour out of 24 hours and rent out the other 23 hours. So that's 24 right. people. You know, let's say you're maximizing that program for that. That's 24 people using a gym per day, but the gym is only getting one person's membership.
It's going to disrupt
I totally get what you're
the
saying,
system.
It's totally.
And so this is going to be applied in many different areas. Think about Uber. Uber in the future, people will not be driving Uber. You're going to be using the same concept, and it'll be basically micro leasing a car. So I micro lease a car from here to the store. I micro lease a car back from here, from the store back home. And the way that it's going to work, when automation kicks in, a self-driving car will come up to your house. You'll pay with crypto. It'll be on a smart contract that takes you from here to the store. You'll micro lease that car from here to the store, and then you'll come back. And that's the way it'll work, I believe, in the next 3 to 5 years with automation. And I think crypto will fully take its place when automation kicks in, because it's really the money of the internet. So
you know what's interesting about that idea is it made me think of those. I lived in China for 5 years, and that was really where, you know, we're starting to see it now, these bike sharing right. things. In China, they're everywhere. You can go somewhere and there's, you know, 1,000 bikes. And this idea of micro leasing a car, the car you take home from the store may not be the right. car you went to the store in, because you can take a car there, get out, get in, somebody gets in that car and they micro lease it, and then you come out and there's another, you know, there's going to be just a bank of cars everywhere you go, and you're just getting in one car and going to where you're going, getting out, and okay, that car is now available, and then you come out, and it obviously comes down to supply and demand. Yep. You know, class of cars, and you really start getting into that. What it makes me, I mean, are you making the connection that because the system is broken right now, and it is like Nicole said, money being probably the main thing yeah. tying us,
the snake's head,
to this 3D world, because we all have to, you know, use it to get around. If that system gets completely disrupted and there's no more physical currency and it moves into this other type of currency, is that going to be a cause for spiritual awakening?
Yes,
because
now you're getting into it.
People are less connected to the 3D.
That's a good
Absolutely,
question,
100%.
Brian.
So the pain, just like with anything in consciousness, the pain will cause awakening. And people, it's going to disrupt so many industries that people will literally be, I'm not going to say be forced to, but pretty close to it, to where they have to turn to something. They have to find a way out. And I really believe that once they do that, they're going to turn to spirituality. They're going to turn to meditation. They're going to turn to understanding what is beyond the veil when it comes to the physical reality. And it'll cause a huge awakening.
You guys really underestimate the power of the dark side.
Yeah, seriously.
Because people like me, people like my parents, people that are stuck in 3D and stuck in the mud.
You're not stuck in
You
3D,
are.
Brian.
I'm okay. I have a role to play here, so just let me play my role.
Your mask is on. Go for it.
I mean, that's why I'm on the podcast. Let's not forget that. We have no interest. So, okay, we all switched to crypto, and I don't see the normal, Joe public saying, oh, it's crypto. It's like, oh, I got to do something else. I'm going to awaken. Is this going to be like,
well, no,
I'm going to keep going on with my life?
But the disruption in the system is going to be the other things like the transferability of gym memberships or people losing businesses or just not being able to do things anymore the way they used to do, or corporations.
And let's just face it, there is a tipping point where you have the early adopters, and then you have all the people who are like, oh, right, I want to do what they're doing. And it just starts to gain momentum. And then you have the people who are really asleep or just like, oh, that's what everyone else is. I guess
the late adopters.
Yeah, the late adopters who just have to get on board, or else it's like you can't use the VCR anymore because the VCR doesn't exist.
Exactly.
You have to adapt. It's just the way everything works. And I love how you brought in that idea of how pain does cause awakenings. And that's why we talk about, like, it's not a pretty journey at many times. There's highlights for sure and excitement, but it's very painful because you're forced to face all the things that you didn't want to face before because you were very content to just be in that comfort, safety.
You have to shine light on the dark, and you have to look at the dark in order to know that a light needs to be shown on it. So
absolutely.
That's painful.
And think about growth too. Like, people literally go to the gym to cause pain to grow. So the same thing will happen in the psychological and the spiritual. And I believe that, like, if you look at the Bible, you look at Revelations, you look at what it talks about with World War III, all this stuff. I believe that World War III, the metaphor for what it's talking about in the Bible, is happening in the spiritual world. It's not going to happen in the physical plane, and so understanding these ideas, understanding that the 5D world, the technology, the internet is all discoveries of what's happening and how we can use it on the 3D world with the internet and cryptocurrency and things of that nature, and how we can start to put our armor on and start to transform from the inside out, and then use the tools that are already there on the outside within the the tools that are in the 5D on the 3D, and start to expand it and really cause this revolution, I guess you would say. And I think that the World War III allegory or metaphor is really a representation of the spiritual and psychological war that's happening as we speak right now.
Mm-hmm. You said allegory, and I couldn't help but think of Algor. Now Brian's
and also too, if you think of the word revelations, this is something that came to me recently. And my question would be, is a revelation the beginning or the end? A lot of people reference it as the end, especially in Bible prophecies and stuff like that. But it's really, I believe, or it could be even both, looking at it from a quantum perspective. So my question would be to have a look at that again and to start to see it with a different pair of eyes, a different perspective, and to understand that we're really moving into the 5D. Everything points that we're moving into the 5D, to understanding the spiritual.
Right. I think that makes sense if you correlate revelation with revolution. Think about the wheel on the car. When it makes one revolution, from the top, and that goes one revolution, it starts over again. And if that's what you're saying about revelation is where we're doing this thing and it's the end, but it's the beginning, and it just goes right in, which is kind of what you pointed out to me about what Jason Layton was talking about, is that we're in this thing and we're coming at
26,000 year cycle.
The 26,000 year cycle that we're going to come around, and it's all going to happen again.
Well, this is the thing that many humans get really caught up in, is the beginning and end of everything. Right. It's like we have to have these definitive moments that linear open points. And close. Very linear points. Yeah. And, one thing that was brought to my attention, which I believe was, I don't know if it was in your light language healing for me, Lisa, or if it was in my Akashic record. So tell me if it was in, but I was, I'm going through my own healing right now. And oftentimes when we are faced with a health issue that could be, however, whether it's a small issue or something that's quite definitely challenges your mortality, it makes you feel like it's the beginning of the end. And one thing I was made aware of is that oftentimes it's actually the beginning of something beautiful. And when we, and you said it, it's all a matter of perspective, perception. When we shift our perception around something, which is moving more into that fifth dimensional thought and not having everything be so linear, is that you can look at it from any angle that you want and have a completely different view of what's going on, which means you've just shifted your whole entire reality.
Right. And
well, it's definitely a part of more Occidental, nation thinking, this linear nation. I know you in your, teachings talk about yin and yang, and that obviously is, a circle, and there is no beginning, and you're on this journey of there's, it's a balance, but it's also conveys movement. If you look at that symbol of yin and yang, there absolutely is this convection happening, and, and that's central teaching. It was interesting living in China because they do not think linearly at all.
I thought you were just going to stop and think.
Okay, wow. So there's that.
I was like, okay, Brian, we don't have to go that far.
Well, there is that. But, it's very interesting. I remember before I moved to China, I read a book about doing business in China, and it pointed that out. It pointed out that you're going there. If you think about a meeting that businesses have in America or, other Occidental nations, there's a beginning, and you've got an agenda, and there's all these things, and we're going to start here. There's an opening, and we're going to do this, and we're going to go through and then we're going to close. And when you go to China, they don't behave the way, and they don't think that way. And you'll be in the middle of a presentation to the chairman of some company, and he just gets up and leaves. I mean, the most important person just gets up and leaves because they don't think linearly. Their belief is they can come and go and come in at any point in the process, and things will come up again. Yeah. So you're not really, even if you leave a linear conversation, things are going to get, somehow you're not missing out. Somehow it's going to be brought back to your attention.
Does that work for them?
It must.
It does, just because the people that cannot leave are just going to tell the chairman what he missed. So, so that's where the thinking doesn't actually happen part comes.
Yeah. And understanding this concept too, it really shows how something that most people would see as magic, like an instantaneous healing, like a theta healing, or clearing blocks, or instantaneous manifestation, where you manifest something pretty rapidly, or you manifest something. Sometimes it happens in a magical, oh my God experience or way. And sometimes it happens in the experience, but that's how these things work, is understanding that these things are not necessarily a positive or a negative or a linear type thing. It's understanding that they're both, and that it's really an infinite opportunity for anything to happen at any given moment. And if you understand how to backwards engineer that and the science behind it, then you can start to really create something that looks magical from the outside, from the normal pair of eyes, as opposed to somebody that understands.
You really have to open your
Right.
mind to be able to see that. Like it made me think of an example. Like, I want an apple. There's say 3 choices. Like, I can get up and go to the store and buy an apple, or, I can meditate and try to manifest an apple, and maybe someone will knock on my door and say they're giving away free apples, and I'll open my door and there will be someone giving me an apple, or, one will just appear on my counter.
Yeah.
But it's not going to appear on my counter if my mind isn't open to the idea.
Right.
That, when you talk about backwards engineering it, you have to believe it because you're creating it. And without that wholehearted belief, I don't think that it can happen.
Is that, there's the famous quote, Gandhi or the Dalai Lama, I think it might have been the Dalai Lama, you have to be the change you want to see in the world. I mean, when I hear you talking about the apple metaphor or allegory, that's what comes to my mind. Is you're saying you have to be open for the apple to appear or come to you in any way. It's not just going to appear. I don't think that's one of the possible solutions, that all of a sudden it's just going to
never happen for you.
Come out of another, slip in time, and all of a sudden Apple just shows up.
I think we'll get to a point, probably not in our lifetimes, but I think we'll get to a point where we understand the technology where we can do stuff like that. But for right now, you can certainly manifest those things, and usually it can come pretty quickly, and it could come in a form of, like, a good example would be money. If you wanted to manifest money, it can come into a form of a miracle, like winning the lottery, or somebody having some kind of money show up randomly, like an old job that you were in that went under and you had stock in it, or, something like that. Or it can come in a form of experience where you learn, where the universe gives you the things that you need to have those things. And this is my next conversational piece teaching that I will be going over in the warrior training. And it really comes down to presence. So understanding that the universe will provide those things. Are you aware and paying attention enough to see them coming? And so what I'll be teaching is the mechanics of letting go, which is, the translation is presence.
That ties in with what we were talking about earlier about money being the head of the snake.
Yeah.
And it's really what keeps us suppressed and keeps us in that slavery program, because we're taught to believe that we have to have money. It has to be example 1 of getting the apple. You have to have money to go to the store and get an apple. That's the only way. And we're taught and we're programmed to believe that. So, the freedom comes when you let go of that program and you're willing to move into a new one. Right.
I remember being in grade school, and early math is taught with money. In school, it's like, on the workbook paper, it shows money. And I mean, that's one way that we learn how to count and do math, is dollars and cents.
Yeah, totally.
Makes it more fun.
And just understanding value.
Your point being that early programming.
Right. No, that's yeah.
Right. Yeah. The program.
For Brian to say that, I want to highlight.
I didn't say anything about programming. I just said I learned how to count money.
Brian has a adverse effect or reaction towards the word programming.
Yeah, I think it's
and synchronicity.
Yeah. Oh, synchronicity too.
Well, yeah. Well, Christian, I don't want to disappoint you, But I do believe that we will be around when this technology is released, because I do believe the replicator does exist, and I do believe it's here on Earth right now. It's just suppressed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely possible. I think you might be right, and I hope that's the situation. I think that I think it's very much possible, and I think that it's a technology just like anything else. Kind of going back to where we started in the beginning of this, it's a technology that needs to be backwards engineered, and we need to bring the mysterious into the known or the awakened and understand how it works. And I think telepathy. I think I don't know about transportation or anything like that, but who knows? Like it may very well be possible. And I think telepathy, I think we're pretty close to that. I think we can start to, when we understand intuition and how to use the intuition correctly, I think we can get pretty close to that. But I think, if we continue backwards engineering these things scientifically, we'll understand it.
Yeah. So, I'm curious, Christian, because I'm actually really looking forward to coming to your talk and hearing more about what you're going to be discussing, because I actually find this conversation very refreshing. It's very different from what we've had on the show, because we haven't really talked about cryptocurrency too much.
No, it's been great.
Or technology.
Technology.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. And I love how you're bridging the gap there between spirituality and technology. What are you most excited about for the Quantum Revolution tour? Like, what are you just like giddy kid at Christmas excited about?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I couldn't tell you an exact answer because during the last tour, the things that I thought were going to be like, I'm not too sure about this, were the most exciting. So for example, the breath work, the experience that I saw and I went through with the breath work was nothing short of magical. Like, just imagine, what breath work will do scientifically is, I believe it releases DMT. So you don't necessarily need ayahuasca or, DMT or any other exterior thing to have this amazing experience. And if you,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you, for the unenlightened, what is DMT?
Yeah, so it's a chemical reaction in the body that is, a lot of people relate it to like the third eye awakening. It causes a hallucination basically, and I'm not an expert in this area by any means, and I can't give you the scientific name behind it, although I can look it up quickly. But
so it's a chemical reaction. Okay, so DMT stands for some
chemical
thing.
And basically, you start to see, from my understanding, is you start to see beyond the veil. Like you can see energy. You can see, a lot of people talk about seeing sacred geometry and these really interesting visuals and stuff like that. So within the breath work, you'll kind of go through an experience like that, and you'll understand that these tools are also inside of you, and you can use them at will without having to rely on anything exterior. You don't have to go to Peru to do ayahuasca, and if that's something that you want to do, then that's, by all means do it, but you don't necessarily have to do those things to access this type of information. And understanding the techniques and understanding the tools and the things that we teach at the tour, you will have access to them at any given moment.
So when you talk about breath work, you're talking about some sort of meditative controlled breathing.
It's a controlled breathing. It's a shamanic technique. So it's a shamanic breathwork technique. And a lot of people relate it to the, what Jesus often talked about was the light body or the rainbow body. And you'll start to activate the rainbow body or the light body within this breathwork technique. And I think it stems from DMT. And
so you said that you had nothing short of basically a miracle experience. Do you want to share with the audience what happened for you?
I actually, because I was covering I was doing a lot of the media coverage at the time for the tour. So I was just like I don't know if you got to watch the healing video that we did.
The one from Thailand.
I was the observer. So I wasn't actually doing the breath work, but I was watching from the outside, and I was just watching what the group collectively was experiencing, and it was jaw dropping. Like, and
thank goodness, because you saw the beetle,
right,
that no one else
right.
knows.
So I was filming the last tour, and I do a lot of the media stuff and the marketing stuff for the tour and for the brand. So I have to be behind the camera a lot of the times and stuff like that. So I was doing that during the breath work, and I witnessed everybody going through it. And also I talked to people individually, and they all kind of gave me the same experience. Like, I was seeing these really, really cool visuals and feeling amazing. And everybody woke up and everybody was like crying, and like, it was really emotional too. Everybody was crying and connected to each other, and just realizing like this physical reality is a matrix, and there's something beyond the veil. We don't necessarily know what it is or how it works, but there's something there, and we want to explore this, and not like in a weird, crazy way, but like meditative, peaceful, understanding the natural ways of doing it.
Well, I think you just highlighted something very important that goes back to something we talked about earlier, in this idea that, Brian, you were talking about, well, my parents, they're not awakened. They're just, comfortable. You have, you Christian, you were the observer. You were on the outside. You weren't taking part in the actual ritual and ceremony that everyone was doing. But you felt a shift. You could feel it.
For sure.
Which kind of speaks to the fact that as more and more of us start doing this and we start creating this sort of shift, other people start to feel it because we're so connected. It speaks of the collective power. And so I think that just kind of highlights what you were talking about earlier, in that, even if you think you're not aware or you're not part of it, you always are in some capacity. And I think that just is a great highlight of that particular
well, it's because of that interconnectedness that we all are, that we don't seem to see, but it's really happening. And we've talked about this before. When you say raise your vibration or your joy, you impact like so many, like Jesus impacted, millions of people, or just by raising. It's from that book, Power versus Force, right? You raise your.
Yeah, there is you have a collective power that when you reach certain levels of emotion, consciousness, because everything carries a frequency. So the higher your frequency, the more people you affect.
Totally.
So for instance, when you're in a much higher constructive consciousness, you have the power to affect hundreds of thousands of people who are in a destructive consciousness and balance out the negativity.
Right. Well, that makes sense why you guys are both always saying, "Oh, I'm more awakened than, I will admit or I believe," because I spend more time with the two of you than anyone else. So,
and it's interesting too. So what it really opened my eyes as the observer, and what the witness or the observer, the role that it plays in anything. So one of the things that I talked about recently in a video is the importance of the witness. And what happens is there are many different variables happening simultaneously in any given situation. Not necessarily like the linear way of thinking is there's a positive and a negative. Not necessarily true. There is positive and negative at the same time. And what will determine that is the witness. So the observation of the witness will determine which perspective it is in physical reality. It's the split test. I think I put it on the video. And the scientists were baffled because once they introduced the witness into the equation, they started doing all kinds of weird things that were unpredictable.
Yeah.
It's on your Phuket video.
Yeah.
It's right at the beginning.
And so that introducing that into the equation, it's a way to bring things into reality, and understanding manifestation too. Like, you have to have a witness, even if the witness is yourself. You have.
It makes total sense. I was actually talking to Brian about this the other night. I gave him this simple analogy that, we could go, I don't know. I forget what the analogy was. That it was like we could go to.
That's a good story.
I know, good story. But we went like we could go to an event. We could go, to go skiing or go to a movie or whatever it is that we do, and come home. And I could have had like an absolutely miserable time. Like, I hated the waitress and the food was bad and it was cold outside and the traffic was awful. And Brian could come home and say, wasn't that the greatest day ever? The snow was so beautiful, and, whatever the case may be. So, there can be a positive or a negative on anything in your life, depending on how you choose to look at it. So is it one or the other, or is it both?
Well, and here I'm going to blow your mind.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Because I think this also speaks towards the programming that you guys are always talking about. It also gets into who controls the narrative. It's not just about who sees it and who's the witness, but who gets to say what the message is. Because you could witness one thing, and as long as you control the message and say, well, this is what I saw, then that's, history is written by the victors, right? So the people on the other side of lots of battles, both, physical warlike battles and mental, it doesn't matter what it is. You're like, who's controlling that? It's like, well, when you look at science and, okay, this is what we believe, medicine is great. And there's this whole other side that was, looked at as fringe, and, it's all tied together.
It's absolutely about the narrative. I mean, it's mainstream media. You can take any event and whatever spin, they want you to induct, then that's the spin that they're going to put on it. And it could be the total opposite way.
Right.
Which, goes back to, like, we could just go on, not like about school and what they're teaching you and in history and everything you've ever learned since you were born.
Yeah. And there's another layer of this that's really interesting too. So understanding the law of attraction and some of the things that are left out with that, understanding what's going on in the physical, it could be positive and negative at the same time, or it is positive and negative at the same time, but it's also reflexive, meaning that if you look at, actually George Soros put out this idea. It's called the theory of reflexivity. And it's basically stating that everything is a feedback loop. And the way George Soros, going back to money, the way he makes his money is he bets on these feedback loops. So he knows that the feedback loops, like politics today, are so polarized that it'll go back and forth through, it's reflexive. It'll bounce back and forth, just like if you put two mirrors in front of each other, or if you put two mics next to each other and it makes that really loud noise. It's a feedback loop, and it's reflexive, and it goes back and forth, and at some point it will tip. So George Soros
I would just
place a wager on that tipping point, and
I would like to say the reason why he probably has so much money is because he controls the feedback of that whole loop. He knows, because he's controlling the information that goes out and they know how people are reacting to certain information. And so therefore he has a very inside scoop on what's going to be happening with that feedback.
What is he? What's his role?
He's controlling the narrative.
He's the
witness.
What you're saying? He's the observer.
Yeah.
So his perspective, he can see, based off of him knowing that it's a feedback loop, he can see these things almost ahead of when they actually happen, and place his money on certain cultural events and things like that to make sure that feedback loop tips over. So he observes.
Yeah.
He's a witness.
Thank God there are more observers coming in and waking up and disrupting that feedback loop.
Totally. It's a really crazy game. But this is also to the way the law of attraction works. It's one of the missing things that nobody really talks about is it is reflexive. It's a feedback loop that keeps going and going and going. And based off of your perception, which will come down to also your presence, that's what will be delivered to you within the law of attraction.
Yeah. You said something very important that I think it's really coming to the forefront of a lot of people's awareness now, because it wasn't really talked about a lot in the when I think about my journey, it's only in the last year or two that I'm really starting to hear more information about this being discussed and being brought into people's awareness. This idea that the positive and the negative exist at all times. And I received a lesson in Tulum about this idea that why do you have to choose one or the other? Why can't you experience both simultaneously? Right. And I think we're kind of coming into that place where we're now being open to experiencing not just one or the other, which is separation, but kind of the both, and this idea of like you can experience sadness and happiness at the same time, and not have to judge it as good or bad. And I think, when I just heard myself talking about George Soros and listening to you talk about it, it's like, he does have a role, and the role some people can look at is completely, satanic. Or there are people who actually look at him like a saint. Right. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. He's just part of the process of all of us like learning here and figuring everything out.
And also too, going back to experiencing it at the same time, where you get to the point, I like to call it, well, it's not I didn't coin it, but I learned it. And it's the idea of this vehicle mind state. So in other words, the bad things are only there for the good things. They serve the good things. They're actually put there by the light. So the darkness is put there by the light cleverly to expand. And the only thing that's ever going to happen is expanding, because it's the nature of the universe. The linear mind, the human mind, will say it contracts. But when you look at it from a quantum perspective, you understand that it's only contracting to expand. The dark is only there for the light, et cetera, et cetera. So people like George Soros and people that would be, or anything that's looked at as a negative thing, when you start to experience both at the same time, you say it's there for a reason, to be grateful for it. And you can literally override the system and experience both at the same time, knowing that it's only there for the light. And the only thing that really does exist is expansion and light.
That makes so much sense when you talk about how that's the missing piece in the law of attraction. Everything's positive. Just think positive and look, but if you don't go into those darker parts of yourself and shine the light on them, there is no expansion.
Exactly.
There's no place to go. You're still trapped within the same space that you had before. I think Jessica said it in the podcast that's coming out, or just came out last week, just how the law of attraction isn't working, and she talked a lot about that we're not going into the dark, we're not expanding.
Totally. And
she gave the whole example of putting the water in the teapot, and it would be frozen there, but it can't expand. It needs more space, and you have to go back to its original form so you can put it into a new form.
Yeah, and it's just that idea of the way the law of attraction has been taught to so many people is really that kind of put your head in the sand kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Pretend it doesn't exist, and so it doesn't. But it's like, well, if you can't embrace those, one of the things like I just really learned through my journey in my early 30s was that if I can't love and embrace the parts of me I hate the most, then they're always going to persist.
Right.
And so that's going to always cause you problems in the law of attraction, because they're bound to persist. Anything you resist persists. And so, it's going to work against you. And I think that's a major part of why the flaws of the law of attraction, the way at least it was originally taught.
Yeah, but I think that, it's like Esther Hicks is so big with it, but she never talks about the dark side. They never talk about going deep within yourself and facing the shadows and going through the work, going through the pain. It's like going to the gym. You have to, it's okay to have days where you just want to cry, or whatever it is that you're feeling. Do what you need to do, or
absolutely, and those are one thing that I've learned through my experience too, is those are programs and those are belief systems, and a lot of the time they're unconscious. So the example of like manifesting $1 million, well, how are you going to manifest $1 million if you're not aware that you believe money is evil? So you have to really dig into understanding the subconscious, and there are modalities and ways of doing that, which we will teach at the Quantum Revolution Tour.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So, I mean, other than our audience getting to hang out with the three of us, why would you think our audience should come join us all at the Quantum Revolution Tour?
There's several reasons. It's an experience. It's a magical experience in itself. And my question would be like, what would you do to have the knowledge and experience, to have the wisdom to do the things that you want in life and to experience true freedom in ways? We use technology that will open up and allow your belief systems to change and to reflect the truth. So the truth is you can be a psychic, anybody can. The truth is you can use your intuition, anybody can. The truth is you can manifest the things that you want in your life, like love, like soulmates, like money, like happiness. And really what we do is we use the quantum perspective at the tour, condensed probably about 50 years, 100 years worth of knowledge, experience, and information condensed into 3 days. So you have the tools, you yourself, not us on stage, like you in the audience are a part of the people on stage, you know? So that's what I mean about the experience. It's like you are going to go through the experience and collect the information and go through the experience to have the things that you need, to have the wisdom by the time you're done, to live the life that you truly want to live.
I think that's great. And I love how the information is condensed into a short experience or a short time frame of how we perceive time for our experience. And I'm so excited. And I just had an idea pop into my head. So we're going to totally vlog.
Awesome.
Our whole experience down there so our audience doesn't know this, and I don't even know if you know this, Christian, but we're totally road tripping it in an RV down to Vegas.
So great.
And we're going to vlog our whole experience for our audience. And so if you come down, you'll be able to be part of our vlog experience. Amazing. That we'll be posting on our YouTube channel, and we'll be able to document a lot of what's happening and some of the shifts. And we're just so excited to be part of this because it's going to be completely life-changing.
Yeah. And I don't know if I can ask this or if you can answer, but we can edit it out if you can. But so you kept talking about technology and the different waves of brain waves, theta, gamma. So what is this new, I understand you have some sort of technology that you use that helps to, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Actually, I'm in the dark when it comes to that. So,
hasn't been released yet.
I don't even know the answer to that. I'm sure it's something amazing based off of the understanding and going through, because I didn't really know what I was getting into with the first tour either, but, or the Miami tour, but understanding what was done, like the level of details that are looked at in order to have this experience, understanding that, I'm sure it's going to be nothing short of magical and amazing. And just the miracle cube and some of the modalities, like we did a voice recognition with the group and we ran it through extremely high level algorithms to find out what the group needed. So that's the level of detail that goes into something like this with the tour. So it's using all five, because within manifestation, like you have to really tap into all five of your senses to experience that before it actually happens, you know? So we're looking at all five senses. We're looking at the teachings. We're looking at the ancient unknown information that has been purposely manipulated and taught wrong on the planet, and we're gonna put it out there for everybody to experience within these 3 days.
Cool.
Wow. Okay, so to our audience members, if you want to come join us, and I know you do, then you need to look into, we're going to leave all of this information in the show notes.
And on the website.
And on the website. So lots of places for you to find this. I'm also going to have it on my own website.
Inflexible Me.
Yeah, inflexibleme.com. You guys will want to book your minimum 2 nights at the Red Rocks for the Red Rocks Hotel in Las Vegas. That once you get your booking organized and you have your booking code, you're going to email us, info@enlightenup.us, and we're going to give you a 50% off code for your Quantum Revolution Tour ticket, which I think is a huge steal for everything that you guys are putting on, for everything that's going to be happening over 3 days. And I have to say, I'm really excited about this superhero ball on the Saturday night.
You get to wear whatever you want.
I already have my outfit in my mind. I know what you're coming shopping with me because I know exactly what I need to get. And so, Christian.
It doesn't have to be a superhero outfit. It's just whatever you feel.
Yeah, whatever.
Mine's going to be a galactic hero outfit.
Oh, okay.
So, Christian.
Yes.
I know you've got some of your own stuff going on. Where can our audience find your stuff that you're putting out?
Yeah, so the best place is going to be either Facebook or Instagram. My stage name is Christian Rais, Rais. And I have a website also, christianrais.com, and you can find me there. But I communicate and I bring a lot of my clients on and stuff like that through social media. So that's probably the best place to do that. And
you mentioned you have a show. Did you want to promote that?
Yes, I did. Well, it actually ended, but I did 2 years with a thought leader in the space of liberty and libertarian voluntarism, and also in the space of developing on Bitcoin with Vin Armani, who's a really good friend and business partner of mine. And we did 90 episodes, and it's basically a full, complete. Every episode is unique in its own. We cover news, and we cover from the psychological and spiritual and technological perspective. But we did 90 episodes, and we had a lot of really great guests on the show. Jordan Peterson, Ron Paul, a lot of really outstanding guests, and we covered from the perspective of freedom. So it's all about exploring the ideas of freedom and where we're free and where we're not.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. It was such a pleasure to have you on, and I really appreciate all of the new information that you brought to the audience.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It was great.
Yeah.
Had a lot of fun.
So, audience members, you know what to do. You know where to find all the information we just talked about. Thanks for joining us, Christian. We're going to see you in Vegas, and I hope we see all of you in the audience in Vegas too. We want you in our vlog series, and we actually want you to witness a skeptic becoming a non-skeptic.
Woohoo! Thank you all for joining our show today. We appreciate you tuning in and supporting us. If any of you have any questions you would like answered on the show, or any guests that you would like to see us have on our show, please email that information to us at info@enlightenup.us. And please follow us on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you haven't checked out Nicole's channel on YouTube yet, head on over there for more insight from her, or visit her website, inflexibleme.com, where you can book a personal coaching session or a tarot reading. You can watch some of her most informative videos, or you can sign up for her newsletter. And if you're interested in some light language healing, head to my YouTube channel, Lisa Loves Love, or send me an email to lisa@lisaloveslove.com to inquire about your own personal reading. Thank you again for joining us and supporting us, and we will be back with you all next week.